Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. I have a friend who lost his wife to cancer. After a year, he started going out in search of companionship. He knew my history of being involved with a sociopath. In fact, he actually knew my ex, James Montgomery. So when he had a bizarre experience with a woman he dated for a few weeks, my friend had some questions for me. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'm going to explain 10 things that sociopaths want besides money. This is a live streaming show, and I'll answer your questions at the end of this presentation. So please send them to me as we go along. Back to my story. The woman my friend met claimed to be separated from her husband, although I'm not sure that was true. She pursued my friend relentlessly until they had sex. At some point, she made a comment about a lion needs fresh meat. After that, they spent an entire day together, and then she unceremoniously dumped him. So my friend asked, was this woman kooky like my ex? He told me more, and it sounded like the woman had sociopathic traits, although perhaps not the full-blown disorder. So we spent some time discussing the behavior of people with personality disorders. One of our conversations went like this. My friend asked, what's the first thing sociopaths do when they meet you? I answered, they evaluate you to see if you have something that they want. My friend asked, so what's the second thing that they do? I replied, they look for your vulnerabilities. And then my friend asked, then what? I explained, then they figure out how to use your vulnerabilities to manipulate you to get what they want. This short conversation that I had with my friend identified the sociopathic MO, or modus operandi. This is it. First, do you have something that the sociopath wants? Second, what are your vulnerabilities? And third, how can they manipulate your vulnerabilities to get what they want? Here's the brutal truth. Sociopaths view the world as predators and prey. They are the predators, everyone else is prey. Here's another brutal truth. Sociopaths view all social interactions as feeding opportunities. So, what do they want from their targets? On another occasion, I received an email from a Lovefraud reader asking exactly that question. She dated a man who seemed to be a sociopath, except that he wasn't in it for the money. He had paid for everything and had no access to her financial accounts. So she asked, what are his reasons for staying in the relationship if he doesn't live with me and we don't share anything financially? To repeat, if a sociopath has targeted you, it's because you have something that he or she wants. Often it's money, but not always. Here are 10 more things that the sociopath may want. Number 1, sex. This is a big one. This is what my friend who lost his wife experienced. Sociopaths crave stimulation, and sex is highly stimulating, so they pursue it. However, they are not slaves to their physical urges. Sociopaths often use sex primarily as a tool of manipulation to get something else that they want. Number 2, services. Sociopaths may want you to do something for them that they don't want to do for themselves, like cooking, cleaning, and taking care of children. Number 3, housing. Even if sociopaths don't directly ask for money, they may suggest living together. They'll say it's because they love you so much, when in fact it may be that they have no place to go. Number 4, status. Hanging out with you may be good for their image, especially if you're rich, famous, successful, or competent. Perhaps you're part of an exciting social scene. The sociopath may want to be with you just to gain access to the people that you know. Your status boosts their status. Number 5, image. Perhaps the sociopath needs a partner like you to complete the image that he or she wants to present to the company, the church, or the community. This person may want to appear to be in a committed relationship in order to seem stable and respected. Number 6, cover. Your presence may help them get away with a hidden agenda. I've heard of lots of sociopaths who have a wife, 2.4 kids, and a white picket fence, while they live a double life of sex, drugs, and crime. You may be providing cover for the sociopath's double life. Number 7, connections. Sociopaths may use you, your skills, and your connections in order to pursue their grandiose dreams or entrepreneurial plans. That's what I experienced. Number 8, duping delight. Sociopaths enjoy getting over on people. This is called duping delight. They often manipulate, deceive, and use people just for the fun of it. Some will seduce targets just so they can break their hearts. Number 9, domination. Sociopaths feed on power and control, so they sometimes pursue domination for its own sake. They want to prove themselves to be more powerful than you, perhaps even powerful enough to destroy you. Number 10, entertainment. Sociopaths typically get bored easily, and sometimes they just want to entertain themselves. They want the fun of manipulating someone. They get a rush from getting over on their targets. They just mess with people's minds because they enjoy it. Here's the bottom line. If a sociopath targets you, it's because he or she sees you as useful in some way. Once you are no longer useful, you'll be dumped. My friend was shaking his head over the encounter with a predatory female. Like all of us, he had a hard time coming to grips with how soulless these people truly are. Okay, so let's see what kind of questions we have today. Okay, we got a couple of hellos. Hello from Belize. That's very nice. Thank you for joining us. James Montgomery of Harvest Church. No. That's there are lots and lots of James Montgomerys. It's a very common name. They're all over the world, and so no. I assure you, my ex-husband had nothing to do with any church. He didn't do church. Okay. All right, so DB Max says, I have tried to leave several times, came back forgiving, and I do love him. And he says, because we are married, that it's not over until one of us dies. Does he mean that we have 2 children? Well, he may mean that in the sense that he wants to continue control over you, but if you believe that this person is a sociopath, this person has antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, or histrionic personality disorder, or psychopathy, you have to understand that he is not capable of love. I mean, sociopaths simply can't do it. They do not have the capacity to feel love and caring for another person. And that includes you, and that includes the children. So he may want to continue to have you for some of the reasons that I talked about in this presentation. He likes the idea of a family. He likes the idea of the image. You're providing him with services. You're providing him with sex, all those things that we talked about. He may continue to want that. But if he's disordered, if this person is a sociopath, there will never be any love. If he's treating you badly, it will never get better. There is no rehabilitation for somebody who has antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathy. So it's not going to get better. And, if you're forgiving him, you're just essentially continuing to make yourself weaker. And the longer it goes on, the harder it's going to be to escape. Now, some people recognize what they're dealing with and choose to stay in a marriage like this because of the children. I've heard of plenty of people who made that decision and later regretted it, and I have yet to hear of anybody who made that decision and thought it was a good idea. But there's lots to consider, so I suggest you educate yourself about the disorder. We've got lots of material on my website, lovefraud.com. So the more you understand what's going on, the more it will help you to decide how to proceed. Okay, so Wendy asks, do these people ever suffer from depression due to their wrongdoing? My ex acted like he didn't care, yet he said he was depressed. It is possible for someone who has one of these personality disorders to also experience depression, but I wouldn't say they're depressed because of what they've done, because of their wrongdoing. Keep in mind that essentially what they're missing is a conscience. Typically, someone who has antisocial or narcissistic personality disorder, typically they feel totally entitled to do whatever they want, no matter who it hurts or what problems it causes. So that's what I would say. It's possible for this person to be depressed, but it's probably unlikely that they're depressed because of their own bad behavior. So, Istanbul Cesar Prado says, can a sociopath change? I read somewhere that, is this possible? No. No. Once a sociopath is an adult, they're not going to get healthy. Now, they can change to the extent that they get smarter or more calculated about what they do. For example, there may be sociopaths who had committed crimes and been convicted and gone to jail and decide that they don't want to go to jail anymore, so they stop committing those kind of crimes. But even somebody like this will never become a loving human being. They're not going to grow a conscience later in life. Essentially, there is some opportunity to help people when they're young, children or perhaps even teenagers. But once a sociopath is an adult, they're not going to change. As I said, they can get smarter, they can learn to stay out of jail, or they can get slicker about the scams that they pull or something like that, but they will continue to want to manipulate people. They're going to continue to want to do a lot of the things that I talked about. Essentially, they don't get better. I mean, there actually is a rumor, I guess you could say, or a belief, a common wisdom in the mental health field that sociopaths burn out when they get to age 40 and they stop engaging in sociopathic behavior. Well, I can tell you for a fact, based on my research with 2,000 people who completed my survey, that they don't get better. In fact, that's one of the questions that I asked. I asked if people knew a sociopath both before age 50 and after age 50. And I had a lot of people who said yes. I want to say it's about maybe 800, but I can't recall off the top of my head. But I also asked, did they get better, or did their behavior improve? Did it stay the same? Did they get worse? Well, 91% of people said that the sociopath was just as bad or worse after age 50 than they were when they were younger. So if you're waiting for somebody to grow up, if you're waiting for somebody to mature, it's not going to happen. And the chances are that this person will probably behave worse as he or she gets older. Okay. Okay, so CB asks, why am I so ready to forgive my sociopathic ex? Even she treating like crap. I usually do not forgive that easily. Well, even though the sociopath was not authentically in the relationship, you were. If you felt love for this person, it was real love. If you felt trust for this person, it was real trust. So for normal human beings like you and me, that takes time to unravel. And, and you also may have felt, while you were with this person, that it was your dream come true, because that's what they tell you. You may have felt that this person was going to keep all the promises that they made. So it can be really hard to let go. And that's why no contact is so important, because when you have no contact with the person, that's when the hooks that they have in you and the web of lies starts to unravel. So the longer you're away from this person, the more you can start to see the truth, and the more their emotional grip on you dissipates. So I would say that definitely maintain no contact with this person. Even if you feel like forgiving, even if you feel like reaching out, don't do it. The longer you can stay away from the person, the more the grip on you will dissipate. And the opposite is also true. If you contact the person again or have an interaction with the person again, it all comes flooding back. And all the work that you've done before that to stay away from the person is like out the window, and you have to start all over again. So it's very important to establish no contact. And then after that, it's very important to maintain no contact. And as I said, the longer you're away from this person, the more the grip on you will dissipate. Okay, so what would you want therapists in training to know about sociopaths? Did you go to therapy with your ex? It would be good for therapists to understand what sociopaths actually are. I can tell you from other research that we've done that approximately half of therapists have absolutely no idea what goes on in a relationship with a sociopath. Half of therapists are totally unprepared to deal with a client who walks in their door, with a story about a sociopath. It may be starting to get a little better, but I would say that anyone who studied to be a therapist earlier than 5 years ago has had practically no training in what really goes on in these situations. There's a few places, programs now that are offering better training, but from what I've heard from people who have gone to see therapists, half of them just don't get it. And I also know that a lot of the therapists that I've talked to who do get it the only reason that they do is because they were personally in a situation where they became involved with a sociopath, and that's how they learned what was going on. I mean, they realized that their training was deficient. Their training did not prepare them at all for what was going on. In fact, I've heard from therapists who stayed in abusive relationships longer than they should have because of their training, because they were taught to forgive and work on the communication skills and all this other thing. They were not taught that there were people who are not fixable. I mean, essentially, therapists are taught to view everybody with positive regard. They're not taught to assume that the person may be lying to them. So they get blindsided, just like everybody else does. And as far as going to therapy, I did not go to therapy with my ex, thank goodness. And if you suspect that you are in an abusive relationship, the last thing you want to do is go to therapy with this person. I mean, there are professionals and guidelines that therapy is not indicated. It should not happen if a person is in an abusive relationship. But by that I mean therapy with the partner who is abusive should not happen, because it doesn't work. And essentially what happens is that if you go into therapy with an abuser, first of all, most sociopaths are quite capable of putting on an act that they seem to be, totally responsive and snowing this therapist and getting the therapist on their side. They're very good at that. So that's one thing that happens. Another thing that happens is that when you reveal your thoughts and feelings about things, the sociopath who's sitting there essentially takes that information and uses it as ammunition to torment you further. So it's just not a good idea at all. So if you are involved with someone and you believe this person is a sociopath, if you feel like you're being abused, do not do therapy. Do not do couples therapy with this person. So Karen says, didn't know until it was too late. 40 years of marriage and 5.5 years in court. He planned to destroy me financially, and he did. He stopped paying my alimony. I'm afraid to go after him. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, I've heard stories like that before. Some sociopaths lay the groundwork to financially destroy their spouses, like practically from the day they get married. I mean, I've heard of people who have hidden millions of dollars. I've heard of people who have transferred all the debts into the innocent spouse's name. I've heard of people who have trashed the spouse's, social systems, social support systems. So yeah, that can happen. Essentially, what you need to do is a cost-benefit analysis. You know what this person is like now. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to go after? I mean, if you're going to be destitute without that money, and if you have a strong agreement, maybe it is. The key question to ask yourself is, does this person actually have assets? It's a hard decision because, if you absolutely need the alimony to survive, then that's different from if you just want to do or make him do what he's supposed to do. So you really just have to weigh everything, and it's a very difficult calculation to figure out if it's actually worth it, or if it's just going to cause more trouble than you're prepared to deal with. Okay, so Hope asks, what is the chance that my children with this sociopath will turn out to be a sociopath as they grow up? This disorder, these personality disorders, are highly genetic, which is pretty scary. what that means is that, unfortunately, your children may have been born with a predisposition to the disorder. That's why parenting is so important. They can be born with a predisposition, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will automatically become disordered. There's an interaction between the genetics and the environment is the parenting that you provide, whatever your husband does, and whatever else is going on in the environment. So if your children are young, you have a better chance of trying to divert them from becoming disordered. And the way that you do that is essentially by teaching them how to love. I mean, this is the problem, that sociopathic children are born without the natural inclination to love. They actually don't have a natural inclination to want to be with their parents, with their mother especially. They tend to be highly independent. They tend to, run into the lake and, not be afraid of anything. So these kids, you need to teach them how to love. And one of the ways to do that is to model it, to be loving, to hold them a lot if they're young. You have to work on their impulse control, and you have to teach them moral reasoning. So it can be done. It's hard. Punishment usually does not work with these kids, if they have the genes for disorder. So, but rewards can work. So you really have to think carefully about how you're moving forward. Also, if you're separated from your ex, I hope so, sociopaths make terrible parents, and sociopaths will do things that can help the disorder to flourish, by the way they treat the kids. So it actually is best to do what you can to limit the exposure that your kids have to the disordered parent. However, this is really problematic because the courts don't often see it that way. They believe essentially that all parents have the right to enjoy their children, and it can be tough. So there's this fine line to walk between, trying to keep them away and not being accused of parental alienation, in which case you could lose the kids totally. So it gets really messy. But if they're young, you can work with them and do what you can to try and make it so that the disorder does not develop. Well, Deborah Mack says that she, DB, I don't know if that's Deborah, I just made an assumption there, considered moving the day he is at work and cut all ties when the kids are 18 so he can't find me. He has no conscience, and you're right, it's scary. Well, that's a plan. It's definitely best to leave one of these individuals when they're not home. If the kids are 18, then you don't have the child custody issues because they're emancipated. So that's a reasonable plan. Okay, it looks like that's the end of the questions for today. I thank everybody for joining me, and we'll see you next week, next Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time for the next episode of Lovefraud Live. Thanks a lot. See you then.